Record. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Career Labs session Q&A with a recruiter. Our recruiter is Randy. Randy works at Zapier in tech and all things recruiting, hiring, etc. Has so much insight to share with you just on whatever you might want to know. A little before we get into the guts of that beautiful Q&A, I just want to give you kind of a recap of where you should be in the Career Lab process. Started on Sunday, kicked things off with LinkedIn revisions. I'm doing the LinkedIn module that we have. So if you haven't already, start digging deep into that, watching the videos, getting the advice and refining your own LinkedIns, because it will take you way longer than you ever would expect to refine your LinkedIn. So be doing that. If you have questions, post them in Slack. We can answer them. Ask Randy. Randy's got a lot of insight on that kind of stuff too. And then this week, we're just learning more about telling your story, landing the interviews. And next week, starting next weekend, we'll start really digging into doing the actual interviews and practicing those skills. So before we jump in, any questions on the stuff that y'all have been working on so far? Good. Okay. If you ever do have questions, just ask. We're always here for you, and we're all in this together. Okay. Without further ado, questions for Randy. There really is no secret sauce to an intro here. Randy, do you want to give an intro about who you are, what you've been up to?
So, hey everybody, my name is Randy Alvarenga. I am what's technically called a talent sourcer. So you may have heard there are recruiters, there are talent sourcers, there are also recruiting coordinators. So I'm part of the special sauce that goes into hiring people at any company. And I can talk a little bit about the differences in those roles later, but my journey to get here sort of started with, it's totally fine. My journey to get here is it is a little unorthodox. I have a background in theater, so I spent a couple of years working abroad, doing what I loved, and still do love it, still do it. But I decided, hey, I wanted to make a shift in my career. I wanted to move back closer to my family, and so I came back to America, and I thought, what do I enjoy doing? I enjoy helping people and like connecting them to like things that get them excited. So that's what led me initially to recruiting. And so part of that was finding talent. And so that's what I do here at Zapier. I find people for the roles that I support. So, yeah.
I love that. So with that being said, what questions do you all have about the process of getting interviews, getting hired? Nadia.
Yeah, I have a question about, so what ways do you use to hire people? Do you reach out by yourself, or do you go to some, I don't know, a pool of candidates? And another question linked to it is, do companies ever look into what has been submitted through their work with us form on their websites? So I'm just asking because I had no responses using this form, although I read about recommendations about it. So that's why I wanted to know from you, since you're the one.
Yeah.
doing it.
So first, I'll say it can really vary depending on the company. Some companies will rely on other things like algorithms to pull information from people's like ATS. You may have heard this. LinkedIn had a big thing about it recently, where people were complaining about, hey, my resume is going into these things, and some people were saying, hey, don't apply to companies with ATSs. First, I am strongly against that, and I say that because ATS or applicant tracking systems help us do our job. Like, I love automation, and part of it is, depending on the role, you can get hundreds and hundreds of applications, especially earlier career applications, which can be really hard. And so some of the ATS systems do sort of look for certain criteria that the people programming those systems like are saying are necessary for the role. So there are situations where we pull people from that pool. I, as a talent sourcer, am looking actively for people. So I go into LinkedIn, I go into conferences, I look at people who are getting laid off, people who are in like organizations like the Collab Lab, right? Like any kinds of places where there's talent that matches what I am working on. And so I'm like finding people in that way. And if you're applying to a place and they're asking you for some kind of work, some like a resume or a project or those kinds of things, we're checking those. I mean, I go through people's GitHubs like all the time to make sure that they have the basic skills and frameworks that I'm looking for. So I would say there's no one size fits all for any company. Every company does their version of hiring different. But I would say if you want to get found, make it easy to get found. And we're going to talk about some of the strategies you can use to like really make your LinkedIn as attractive for a sourcer like me as I'm looking for it. So yeah.
Yeah, I found too, Nadia, because I've had the same experience. Like on some companies' websites, you'll apply and you'll get radio silence, never hear back at all. You have other companies who are have a much deeper dedication to reviewing every application, like Zapier does, where you should hear at least something, even if it is a rejection, which is the kind thing to do. But it's so annoying when you don't hear anything. And what I've always very much leaned on, which I would encourage you to, is your networks. Because if you can find somebody like Randy that you can like get in with, you know, like if you're in a, you know, women who code group and you can meet with all them and be like, can you connect me to a talent sourcer at your company or connect me to a hiring manager or somebody? If you can get your foot in the door, that is going to be a million times more effective than applying through a form on the website every time. So I say like forms second, do fill out the forms, go like shotgun spread a bunch of forms out there to just get your name out there. But more than that, put your effort and all your time and energy into networking and meeting people, because that's how you'll get to the people.
I mean, if someone reaches out to me in my network and is like, hey, I'm looking for this role, even when I'm not hiring, I will go to bat for people, especially if we've had some kind of interaction in the past. What I will say can be hard as a talent sourcer is, so I get lots of messages from people on LinkedIn all the time. And some of them I like very clearly am like, hey, I work on mostly engineering roles. And then I'll get someone who is like applying for a design role or something that's a little bit different. And I'm like, I have no context as to who is running that search. I can go and find out, but it's probably easier if you just apply and then let me know that you've applied, right? So networking shouldn't be a, hey, what can you do for me piece. I think is also the thing that I've seen some applicants do. It really should about us getting to know each other, right? Like, even if we're not hiring right now for a role that you're interested in, if you're interested in my company and you let me know that, and I'm like, yeah, we're not hiring anything, I'm way more likely to go back to your profile and be like, oh yeah, I remember this person. They showed a lot of interest. They really like what we do here. And then it makes it a lot easier to recommend that person to the hiring.
Right. Yeah. And like, again, like Randy was saying, making it easy for that person. So there have been a few people who, like, I get LinkedIn messages all day too, and most of them, honestly, I ignore because I don't have the time and that's not my job. If I'm actively hiring, that's when you'll see me in there responding to a bunch of people. But like, usually I'll be like, go apply through the website, go apply through the website, or whatever it is. But when somebody comes to me with like a really robust explanation of who they are and what they're looking for and specific questions, and they make it easy for me, I'll just like stick them in a referral because I'm like, heck yeah, you did all the work for me. I have to refer you now. That was beautiful. So like make it easy for people, because again, you're basically asking them for something. So it's like you need to give.
And the other thing is, because there are companies that give you radio silence after you've applied. Is that a place you would really want to work? Is the question I would ultimately ask myself. Because being in a place like Zapier where there is so much transparency and conversations as to what's happening, like it's night and day how we think about our candidates versus like other places I've worked. And I worked in exec tech recruiting before this, which was a very different monster. But yeah, I would just say like apply, do the things, but also like try to build those connections at the end of the day. Yeah.
I think for me, like, I swear I'm going to let y'all ask questions. I'm going to stop talking in a second. But for me, whenever I'm like involved in the hiring process, somebody has to really freaking shine to like catch my attention. Because like Randy's saying, hundreds of people like get filtered down to like even where I would be. So thousands is what like recruiting is dealing with. And so if your LinkedIn isn't well refined, if you don't have like a really sparkly like online presence, not necessarily sparkly in personality, but like it's very robust, it's filled out, there's a lot there for me to look at, then I'm gonna be like, no, because there is somebody else who does have a lot of stuff for me to look at. And I don't mean like a lot as far as like quantity, like you don't need hundreds of projects, but have a few really good, well-rounded ones that aren't just code, but have a good README, that maybe have issues of things you want to tackle next, that show that you are a very well-rounded person and not just somebody who learned to code and now you're trying to get a job. It's my advice. Okay, now questions. Any other questions about the whole thing? Anything?
I have a
Helen.
lot. I can give them one by one or all in a go, whichever is better.
Hit us with one. Let's see what it is.
Let's start with one, and then we can go from there.
Okay, this is a pretty short one, maybe. Do you advise putting your resume in like the website or LinkedIn versus when you're applying specifically or when someone reaches out? Because I've heard kind of different things.
Yeah, and it depends on the company. Companies do it differently. For example, like Zapier, we don't really use resumes like too much. You are still allowed to add those resumes when you submit your application. So if you have them, that's not saying don't send it. Like we'll still look at it, but especially tech companies, I would say LinkedIn is so much more used nowadays than just relying on the resume. The resume is there to add more depth to what you've done and to give more details. And your LinkedIn is sort of a way for us to like view that in a much more sort of easier to digest way, right? So what will typically happen to me is if I see a really awesomely built out profile in LinkedIn, I'll go, I want to know more about this person. I want to go and dig into this. I want to talk to them in the interview process, right? And then that's where we'll get a lot more of that information. So I would always err on the side of having that LinkedIn presence built out. And then if you really have been working on your resume, awesome, show that to us. But like you gotta get seen first. And the first way to do that is in the way that we're sort of moving as an industry, which is to use more LinkedIn.
Well, it's kind of like if you're in recruiting and you're going to look at 500 applications today, if you're looking at a bunch of different styles of resumes, it's really hard to understand where people fit in your like ratings. But when you're looking at the same template and you can compare them all like in the same space, it's so much easier. So like when I'm looking at the 500 LinkedIns, if I see yours and it really stands out because it's beautiful and robust and tells me a lot about you, when I flip to the next one, it shows me almost nothing. It's very obvious that that's like, well, that's a no from me. That's a no from me. So LinkedIn for sure, I would lean on as the first and foremost.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Because like sometimes I guess it might be also the systems the recruiter is using. So they might still need a resume copy afterwards. But it's definitely helpful to know where to focus attention.
Some ATS systems require a resume when you add applicants, right? And so there are some companies I've seen where you cannot be considered for a role without a resume, which is but that is a thing that some older systems have. So I mean, but like as far as, especially for me, because my job is to go out and find people all day long, right? I'm looking at LinkedIn most of my day. I'm like digging into LinkedIn. I'm testing out different ideas for how to find people and trying to uncover every stone, I guess. So yeah, LinkedIn for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
My follow-up question. Oh, sorry, please go.
No, please.
My follow-up question is like in the tech industry today, and I know I'm talking to a very particular group of people who supports like people who are doing career change or like building early career skills. But do you find that the non-traditional software engineer background is still a turnoff in certain places? And I guess the corollary is where do companies that are more open to early career or career changers looking more often? So I know there's LinkedIn, but like, are there other specific forums? And I know, like Stacey, you mentioned like Slacks or community groups of sorts. But I'm curious to know like where they tend to be,
Yeah.
if there is such a place.
So let me make sure I'm getting the full question. First, I will say, as part of the groups, like joining groups like Women Who Code, joining any like getting as involved in that tech sort of sphere that you can is always going to help you get seen. Because we're searching through not just LinkedIn and all of that. Can you say the beginning of your question again? I'm sorry. My brain just sort of lost it.
No, that's me asking really long questions. So it's not you. I was asking, how much is the non-traditional software engineer background a turnoff, or like, do you, I guess, is it, and where do you see that?
I would say no. And I would say that very strongly, because people who are engineering understand that an engineering education can be done in so many different ways. Like that's been the case for how engineering is. Now, there are some engineers who do have like an older set mindset that you have to have XYZ, but like any company that's being innovative and changing and growing, I would say they're open to people who have the skill set. It's about whether or not you can prove that you can do what they're looking for you to do.
That's what I was gonna like just add to that. Like, I don't think there's a problem with having a different background. I think that's a superpower, but I think it's the way that you position yourself. Like, you have to know it's the superpower, and you have to really make that case that not only do you qualify, you know the skills that they want, but you also have all of this other extra stuff to add to it. I've seen a lot of people struggle when they go into it and they're like, well, I was a teacher for 15 years and I'm just learning how to code. And they kind of like tiptoe around the fact that they're like a really valuable asset to this company. And so like really leaning into that. And if you see it as a benefit and you can position it as a benefit, then I don't see anybody who would be like, well, but she was a teacher for 15 years. They'd be like, oh, she was a teacher for 15 years. So she has all these skills and she knows how to code. Like, brilliant.
So
Positioning.
yeah, I like to think of it and frame it in my mind as storytelling. How can you tell the story of your career and your journey in a way that makes sense for the role? And you can do that in so many different ways, right? Like I had this background in theater. When I started thinking, hey, I want to interview for companies in tech, I remember there were some people around me who were like, what? That doesn't make any sense. But when I went into that first interview, I was like, no, absolutely it makes sense. Like, I'm speaking to people, I'm connecting with people and sort of building relationships. What about collaborate? How have you been a collaborative team member? And I'm like, that's all theater is. Like I do it all day, right? And so learning how people perceive whatever experience you have, and then learning to frame it in the right way is the important part. So I would talk to people who are engineers. You guys are already doing that just by the nature of like joining programs like this. But like talk about your experience, ask them what they would think of people with that kind of experience, and then how you can maybe work on sort of sharing that in a way that really relates to what you're doing as a software engineer, right? And that's going to make people, because you're going to shine, because not everyone's going to have that, right? They're not going to be like, hey, I have this background having done this. It can be hard. Like I'm saying that, and I'm saying, hey, go and do this thing, but like there's not a one size fits all, and it's really unique to your experience. But learning to tell that story is the important part.
I have to say too on this, echoing Randy's, it's hard because it is freaking hard. It's so hard to get your like foot in that first role in tech. It's so hard. But it's like once you get that first one, like they start rolling in after that. So if you can like get your foot in the door, like a lot of people are like, oh, like I don't want to take this role with this company because it doesn't like it seems like it might be a toxic place or stuff. Sometimes as an early career engineer, you have to bite the bullet and take it to get the experience so that you'll start being taken more seriously. For me, I was like a single mom with two really young kids and needed like I had done boot camp and was freelancing. It was a terrible space for me to be freelancing. And then I couldn't get anybody to take a chance on me. And I needed all these things like remote, flexible, good benefits, etc. And was striking out so often getting my first like engineering role, like salary job, that I realized like, okay, the path of least resistance for me is going to be going into a really technical company and support and then moving over from there. But getting the first one can be really hard. And sometimes you have to like take something that you weren't expecting. Maybe you have to take the freelancing job. Maybe you have to take the support job or the job at the company that is a startup and seems scrappy, but it's going to give you the experience that will look good on your resume.
Yeah.
So
for me,
it's hard.
For me, I hopped in doing a contract role. It was very short. I knew it wasn't going to be where I lasted, but I knew it would sort of get me at least the experience that I would be able to go into the next interview and say, hey, this is what I did.
Yes.
And this is related in this way. So
yeah, getting your foot in the door, getting those first couple roles, and then after that it becomes so much easier. But just know this isn't forever. The struggle isn't forever. But that's
any other questions?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Helen also. Are you self-taught? Because you have a really beautiful portfolio. So I was almost late for this meeting because I was looking at your website and like, wow, I could steal this idea. And
Oh, that's so nice of you. I learned with a group called 100 Devs. I don't know if you've heard of us, but it's a free program. It's similar ethos to the Collab Lab. It's led by an instructor who is head of engineering for a nonprofit called Resilient Coders, which is all about like paying people to develop a software engineering skills so that they can also transition into tech. So I have to give credit to that community. And I guess my personal interests, I've always been very interested in visual arts and design. It's like, if you look at my code, it's really messy, but I think that's like why I spend a lot of time trying to like make things look and feel nice. I think the bigger challenge for me has been like, well, where do I go from there aside from just having a nice surface? What can I make something do and what can I build? But yeah, that's so nice of you. And I would also love to build new things with you if that makes sense for your schedule.
Yeah,
that's
thank you.
I love this.
Me too.
I still have questions to Randy. Oh, I almost lost one. So if the company is not openly saying that they're looking for junior roles, I mean their website, can I still reach out their sources or recruiters and ask? Because I'm just not a very outgoing person, so I am afraid of jumping on people and asking if they hire junior engineers.
So there's a couple of things. Obviously, the beginning of your question was if they're not actively sourcing. So I'm understanding that you've already done the research, looked at their website, and looked to see what job openings. That's the first thing I will say anytime, is to make sure that their public presence isn't like saying that they're hiring for those things. But the next thing is, if they're not open to hiring right at that moment, it's totally fine to connect with the recruiter and the sourcer and say, hey, I looked at your website. I didn't see that you were hiring these roles right now. I love your company. Here's why. I would love to connect and then like stay in touch in case any of those roles do open up, is the way I would frame that, right? Because what you're saying in that situation is, I'm here because I really value what your company is about. And we can have like that connection there, so that when the time is right, when that role does open up, not only will they remember you, right? They're going to be able to, you're going to be connected when they start posting about that job. And so you'll be able to see it. So it benefits you in some ways, but it also just makes it much easier to get that first message from them. And then if they don't message you back, you are already connected. When they put that job posting up, you can reach out and be like, hey, I realized that you guys are looking for this role. We connected a few months ago. I'd love to talk to you about it. And usually I'll be like, oh, yeah. Because sometimes my brain is scattered. Like I'm talking to so many people, right? So if I'm not very quickly doing that, reach out and I'm like, yeah, let's talk. That's awesome. And then usually that conversation leads to the next. The networking.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, thank you for the scenario and some ideas of the phrases, because I finally realized that there are some other person was trying to give me the same advice, but at that moment I didn't understand. So why he was steering me towards this company, because I had some similar values, and yeah, I need to write it down because I would never get to this idea myself.
So I have this background in theater, right? As a person in my everyday life, am extremely introverted. I do not like to go talk to people I don't know. I'm much more, I'm able to talk to groups like this. In like before this conversation, I like talked myself up to like be able to do this. But naturally, that's not my first inclination. So I totally understand like maybe feeling slightly apprehensive about sending messages out to people that you don't have that connection with, right? The good thing is a tool like LinkedIn is built for building those connections. That's what LinkedIn is for, right? Even if it's like, hey, I saw you're posting all these great things about your company. I'd love to talk a little bit more about, your company. And most recruiters are always happy to do that. So yeah, I'd
One
say
thing,
know that it's okay to be introverted, but like try. Yeah.
exactly that. When I stepped out, I don't know what all was said, but one thing I want to say about like roles being open and companies taking on earlier career engineers is that for the actual company, for the teams that are working there, it's a really scary thing to take on early career engineers. It takes a lot of work. It takes like you have to put together a whole plan to make sure somebody's supported and can actually contribute well. Yeah, this will be posted for sure. And to come up with a plan so that you can make sure that it's a good experience for everybody. It's a lot harder than taking on a senior engineer who can come in and just figure out what to do. And so a lot of companies, it's not that they don't want to hire early career engineers, it's just that they're not prepared. And so as an early career engineer, if you are really loud in your networks or you're connected with a lot of people, when their company does decide to finally take on early career engineers, instead of being scared because you don't know who to take a chance on, they already have you in their pocket. It's kind of like at Zapier when we were hiring for these early career engineer roles. It's like we get thousands of applicants, however many applicants you're going to get. But the fact that I'm like, I know we can take a chance on these people because I know them, that's like a way better shoe in. So it's just another plus one for networking. Like, be loud on Twitter, find some kind of circle that you're a part of where people can be like, oh, we've been thinking about taking on an early career engineer, but we're just not quite sure if we're ready. And then you can sort of like put yourself into that circle, like, I think you are ready. I'm here for you. Let's go. Twitter is how I've gotten every single one of my jobs in tech.
I would say
Every single one.
And the reason I say that is Twitter is I'm like any social media can be useful if you're curtailing your social media to a certain way, right? Like if you're using your social media to interact with like tech articles and being like involved in like the tech Twitter space, right? I use my Twitter for acting, right? So if I suddenly started like doing like tech stuff on my Twitter, people might be really confused, right? So like realizing how you're curtailing your social media presence is important there, but like definitely a useful tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, can I ask, how exactly would you use Twitter to connect and network with people? I mean, I have no idea how to use social, or I have no idea how to use Twitter. Like, I'm like just getting started. It's more like my, how I keep up to date with what's going on. But how do you like network there?
So one is interacting with posts that people you want to connect with are being part, like up liking things, commenting on them, sharing your insight that you have because you are also in that space, right? So like in as far as like connecting and networking is concerned, you can like other engineers, follow the work and projects that they're doing, talk about projects that you're working on, give like some status updates for the things you're building, right? Because other engineers will be able to see that and really say, oh, this is really cool. I love how you're doing this. And then also, just by doing that, you're going to get more eyes on your work. You're going to get new ideas, and you're going to be able to make it better, so that even if Twitter isn't the original way you get your job, it still can sort of impact it.
Yeah, it's exactly like Randy's saying. What I would recommend is go, like, you could even ask in Collab, what engineers do you follow? And follow engineers who like have the personality that you like, you know, people who are dedicated to diversity in tech, etc. And like follow them, like all of their stuff that they post. Because for me, like there are people who follow me that like engage with all of my stuff that I just know them now. I just know who they are. And if they were ever like, I'm looking for a job, I'd be like, oh yeah, I know this person, because that's how we know people in this day and age. But yeah, go follow a bunch of engineers, because it's not always about hiring managers or recruiters. It's about making friends with other engineers who will take you along with them. For example, Twitter story. I was in boot camp, or maybe it was before boot camp when I was just trying to build for the company I worked for, not as an engineer. And I was having trouble with an API call using Postman. And I was tweeting about it. And this random engineer named Eric like reached out like, hey, yeah, let me help you with that. And he helped me like build this thing just through Twitter for the company that I was working at. I wasn't an engineer. And so I started going through boot camp, and he just followed me and we engaged with each other. He followed along with my story. And one day he was like, hey, I was thinking about coming to Zapier. And I was like, of course I want you to come to Zapier. Like, you've helped me so much through the years. So I referred him. He got the job at Zapier. And I was in support at the time. And I was like, hey, I want to go into engineering. Eric brought me over into engineering, worked with him there. He helped me get the skills I needed to go into management. And so it's like just finding this random person on Twitter who wanted to help me. Like, we've boosted each other's careers over and over again through the years. So like, find friends on Twitter, because friends help friends.
Yeah, and mentoring relationships, like I know part of that is what's here as well, but like finding people who are invested in helping you grow and develop is always going to help you just continue to level up your career in ways that you want it to go. So,
And giving back is like such a good way also to network. Like, whenever you're on Twitter, it's not just about like engaging with JavaScript stuff, you know, like saying Cody things. Like, just give people high fives and pats on the back. Be like, wow, this is really cool, great job, or oh, that's neat. Because I think a big like blocker of mine in my early days on Twitter is I didn't want to say the wrong thing and have all the like, well, actually, guys being there, like, that's not how, you know, whatever works. And so I just like leaned into cheerleading people, and that goes a really long way too. And that's something we can all do.
Yeah.
So yes, Twitter, do it.
love it, love it. Any other questions? This can be about what's actually on your profile. It can be about like the process of interviewing, any of that stuff.
Yeah, I had another question. How important do you think it is to be active on LinkedIn? I mean, like making posts, sharing, whatever, not just building your profile
Yeah,
page.
this is a super great question. I will say it depends on your personality type. I'm, like I said, more introverted. I don't do as much posting as some of my teammates do, right? Like I have a teammate who is perfect at it. It's like her superpower, right? But what that also means though is when candidates are excited about Zapier, they're talking to her more than they're talking to me first, right? So like I know that that's something I need to work on as a recruiter, for example, right? So what I would say is do some of it. It's not, if you don't do a lot of posting, it's not going to hurt your experience. But if you do a lot of posting, it will only help. Does that make sense? Like it shows it shows certain people like your personality, what things are important to you, which can always help your experience in the interviewing process.
Other questions? Nadia.
Yeah, I was typing and so decided to ask it. I have a question about not being a 100% or match for some role, because I have heard quite opposite opinions of, oh, you need to save your energy and apply for something you are sure you are confident in, or apply for whatever and just wait for some results. So that's why I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, I will say in the very beginning, to get your foot in the door, it's probably easier to apply to things that you feel confident in. And the reason I say that is because that's going to help you in the interview process and everything. In the long term, though, I would say apply for things that are stretches. I mean, even like I would say do it now too, but know that, especially when you're early career, what tends to happen is we look at a profile and we have 1,000 profiles. We're going to go with the one that is more of a match, right? Early career. But as you get further in career, there are so many things that differentiate people as far as like the projects they're working on and things they're doing on a day-to-day basis, that we can look at more profiles and be like, hey, this person doesn't have XYZ, but they have XY, and then they have, you know, W and whatever, right? So in those situations, I would say, like, long term in your career, you can start applying for things more that you're not a set match for, but you need the key competencies no matter when you apply, because those key competencies are what they're basically looking at to start even considering you.
Yeah, I have, like, again, getting your shoe in the door is the hardest thing. And I have very mixed feelings on freelancing because for me, it sucked and I hated it. And I would never recommend it to somebody who's early career because they'd give me this project and be like, yeah, that'll take me 5 hours, but then it would take me 25 hours and I didn't really have a good support network and I wouldn't bill for it because I was embarrassed. And it was like really toxic. But like, if I had the community I have now, if I had the Collab Lab and could like ask for help over there, I would do it. But I would recommend, like, if you're having trouble getting your foot in the door, find some kind of project to freelance on, because then once you start getting that on your resume, you're just building experience, even if it's slow, like you're managing somebody's website or something. By putting it on there, you're like building some of that experience that'll help you get seen a little bit better. Of course, don't like fabricate it, but like actually get some project that you can say you're working on for a reason can be helpful to like standing out from those early career engineers. Because, for example, I just looked through hundreds of early career applications recently, and a couple things that stood out to me were that I love career changers, so that stands out a lot to me, and I really like lean heavily on that. But if people built something that they cared about, or they built something that they could clearly talk about the business value of, made them really stand apart. So if they were like, I had this need in my life for an app that would tell me how to get from this to this to do this. It's something that I needed. So I built it, and here's where I built it, and here's what I want to do with it in the future. That's a big deal. Also, if they had worked on a project in their current company that wasn't like they weren't in engineering, but they were like, here's the business value that this had. It showed me that, like, okay, they might not be the strongest coder, but they know how businesses work. And so much of your role as an engineer is businessing and not coding. So like really lean into those aspects of your life. Can you manage a project? Can you demonstrate that and prove that? Because those will be really powerful things helping you stand aside from other early career engineers who are like, I went to boot camp and now I'm looking for a job.
I would also add, put any experience that you think is relevant on your LinkedIn. Hands down, make sure you're talking about your coding boot camps. Make sure you're talking about being part of the Collab Lab and the projects you're working on here. I think at times we can feel like, or I can only speak for myself. I know at times I've been like, hey, you know, this experience doesn't necessarily match and lead to that. But if you put something there, that's like a breadcrumb that can lead to people being like, hey, I want to know more. I mean, that's the kind of engineer I think all of you guys want to be, is the curious, like always continuing to grow people, right? So allow people those opportunities to have that same feeling looking at your profile by making sure you're celebrating your projects, your wins. Talk about the things that were difficult and how you plan to grow on them, right? Keeping that information in your profile will always help in the process.
Yep.
Yeah.
Other questions? Nadia.
Yeah, well, if other guys want to ask questions, I would be happy to give way, because I think I'm occupying the whole Zoom time. But I wanted to ask how people transition to not fully engineer roles, because of my background, I think I would better in some not 100% engineering, but where some communication is involved. So in the Collab lab, I had a chance to try something, I think, related to product or ownership. So do people, because there is no bootcamp preparing product owners or project managers, how do people get into those roles? And is there a way to skip the engineering and get into this position?
Yeah.
I think they're very different. Like,
Yeah.
so a lot of times, at least like in my experience, product managers and that kind of stuff are just a whole different side of things that take no engineering knowledge. So it wouldn't be, I'm going to go be an engineer, then become a product manager. Because honestly, like in a lot of places, you'd be taking a huge pay cut, like getting out of engineering to go into that side. But there are also very like technical product managers who you do need to have like engineering understanding because the product that you're managing is a very technical tool. So that kind of aligns too. But I'm not sure what advice I have. Randy, what do you?
Yeah, I would say on all of the roles that I looked at where we were hiring product managers, we've sort of put them into those two buckets, either like technical product managers and stuff. But most of those people do have a background in engineering. And if you didn't have that background in engineering, it would make it less appealing to move into one of those roles, right? So what I would do is I would look at a lot of product manager job postings. If that's where you think, hey, this is maybe where I want to go, do as much research on it as you can. See what skills they're asking for, especially earlier career product managers, and try to find ones that are leaning with to having that technical ability to code and stuff. I will say it's probably a much smaller pool because I haven't been asked for a lot of those roles in my life. So yeah, I would say, and this goes true no matter where you go in your career. The researching is the most important part for applying to any job. I can tell you night and day, it's completely different when I walk into an interview and I'm talking to someone who's done zero research on my company versus someone who's done all of the research and can tell me about all of the values, right? And how they match to them. Because what's going to happen is that second person, I'm instantly able to see them understanding what Zapier is and how they can work here, right? That's going to be the same thing for any role you're looking for. Understanding the job description, really seeing how you fit it and don't, and then figuring out how to storytell your journey in with that position, right? Where are you going to go? How is that going to track with your goals, right? So maybe if that's where you want to go, Nadia, starting with that more technical role, like getting your foot in the door in a technical role first could be a good step. And maybe you don't have to don't think about it as this is where I'm going to end up. How is this going to help you in your long-term career vision is the important part to really think about.
I think too, like if you want to start in an engineering role and then go into something like product management or engineering management or something else, the way to fast track it is to like really prioritize the work that you're doing. So if you're working on this bug, fixing this bug, you're going to like prioritize the project management aspects of it, the product management, understanding how it's valuable to the business, where it fits in the roadmap, documenting those things, and just get the bug fixed. Whereas like if you wanted to keep digging more technically deep, you would like dig really deep into making sure your solution was the absolute best solution and you could articulate that really well, and you're thinking about how the app can scale or whatever it might be. You'd prioritize that, and you would deprioritize the like documentation and project management of it all. So just in your day to day, really lean into the things that are in the direction you want to be going. And that's a way that you can start collecting the evidence that you would be good at that job to use it in a hiring situation.
And if you're in a place, if you join a company, I would always say look for places that foster growth and development for their people. That's one of the things that really stood out to me about Zapier that I really loved. is that there are lots of opportunities for growth and change here. And some companies not so much, but talking to your manager wherever you are and letting them know, hey, long term, this is what my personal goals are for my career.
Yeah.
Because I mean, a good manager will always be helping you and thinking about how to help you get to those places.
Yep. I've seen a lot of people in support at Zapier move into a lot of different areas. Like we have a lot of people who've moved into product management from support, a lot of people who are moving from engineering into engineering, etc. And so like it like killed me to have to take a support role when I'd done all the training and freelanced as an engineer. But it really is, if you can get into a bigger tech company that does have this growth mindset, a really great path to figuring out what you want to do while you're in a really stable spot. So you have a really stable job where you're getting paid, and now you can take a breath and better understand which direction you want to go in. And then again, in your day-to-day, start leaning into that. Start shadowing people who are product managers, seeing if you can help them with their work a little bit when you have free time. See if you can, help, if you want to get in design, help a designer like create some wireframes or some designs. In a safe space where they want you to grow rather than doing nothing until you can land that full-time perfect job.
And the last thing I'll add to that is it's okay to learn while you're like, you might not like it. Maybe you try it out and you shadow it for a while and you're like, actually, you know what? I really do enjoy the engineering piece of this more. That's also okay. I've seen lots of engineers who have gone into being people leaders and then gone, whoa, this is not what I want to do. I'd rather be an IC. And they're so much happier in that position, right? You're allowed to change in your career and to try things. It's your career.
I love that. Beautiful. Couple more minutes. Any final thoughts? Also, if you ever have follow-up questions to any of this or more questions, just post them in Slack. We will always be there. Brandy's here. I'm here. Everybody's here.
Yeah. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Obviously, I post a lot about Zapier. So I'm sure you're getting that already, but if you want more, come on.
I do have a question. Since we're all in Collab Lab, do you have suggestions for how we should be speaking of Collab Lab on, say, LinkedIn? Because I know it's technically like open source, but it's also this group project, but it's also like a team. So yeah, do you have suggestions?
Yeah. Well, I'll let Stacy start with that because I think Stacy's had lots of experience seeing how people are talking about it.
Yeah, I like to talk about Collab Lab, whether it's on LinkedIn or when you're telling the story of Collab Lab, as if it's a job, because you're working on a team, following agile practices, doing everything that literally my engineering team at Zapier does. You're doing all of those things. So I would shy away from referring to it as like an internship. Like sometimes people are like apprenticeship, internship. Like, no, it was just a team like I was working on a team of engineers like to do this thing. I know there's some different like categories that it makes you put it in. I can't remember what those categories are, but check some of the last cohorts people on LinkedIn and see what they did, because I feel like they talked through that. But yeah, anytime you talk about it, be like, I worked on a team of developers to build this app, rather than we had this group project. Like try and almost move away from like education centric words into career centric words when referring to it.
I mean, I would echo that. I'd say do that for internships, like projects that you can like look at and say, this is a piece of work that we finished and we shipped and it's used in this way. Talk about it like it's a product and that it's shipped and that you're using it in that way, because at the end of the day, that's what we care about in the job interview, right? You should be learning wherever you're learning, be that self-study, boot camp, or whatever. You should be learning to do the job. And if you're already working and doing things like that, put it out there.
Yeah, and like when it comes to Collab Lab and stuff too, a lot of what you'll want to lean on is the teamwork experiences that you got, because no matter what, you're going to go into interviews and they're going to ask, tell us about a time you had a conflict with a teammate, or you had to compromise on something, or you had to do this. And that's where Collab Lab really comes into play, because a lot of people have experience in coding boot camps and stuff, but this is a good experience to be like, I worked on a team where we had this shared common goal and followed these practices, and this is how we made it happen. And that's a big part of landing that job, is being able to speak articulately about those situations. is that a word? Articulately? I was gonna say articulate those situations, and then anyway, you know what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Which, I do that too. Shakespeare made up a lot of his words. So, if Shakespeare can do it, you can too.
I like that spirit. Great. Okay. Anything else? We're always here for all of you. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll put this recording. I know, Nadia, you wanted to pick up some things out of it, so I'll be sure to put it in Slack when it's over. The next step is just continuing to refine those LinkedIns and send those to the mentors you've been assigned so that they can review those with you and give you feedback. And then I think that we don't have another synchronous session until this weekend when we are going to watch mentors interview each other, which hopefully will give you a better idea of how those interviews go and just kind of give you a look behind the scenes, which can help some nerves go away. Anyway, okay.
If you have
with
questions
that,
about interviewing afterwards, feel free to like ask me. I would love to be a resource for as much as I can. So
yay. Thanks, Randy. Okay, good to see you all, and I will see you on Slack. Let me know if I can help with anything. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.